Dan Held, what an honor talking to you. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's actually a premiere. It's the first time you're on a German YouTube channel, and I'm really, really honored and excited having you. And I'm looking forward to picking your mind. So, the first questions, of course, because you're already very long in the crypto space, in the Bitcoin space. Are we still early, Dan?
I think we are. Right? It sounds a little funny because I started when Bitcoin was $10. We've
Yeah.
come a long ways, but I still think Bitcoin has a lot more room to grow. And here's why. If we look at gold, so Bitcoin is trying to solve the store of value problem. How do you store value that's outside the control of governments? And there's only a few assets that work like that. Gold is one of those. So with gold, if you own it and hold it, you have all the value. There's no one else has claim over that other than you. It's a bearer asset. So when it comes to Bitcoin is attacking that same problem, but it's also attacking all of the other stores of value in the world. So there's a terminology in tech called total addressable market, which is if I build a new product, like let's say I build a Airbnb, what's the total size of that market? Well, Bitcoin's total size of its market is in the tens or hundreds of trillions of dollars. It's the biggest market there is. It's all value in the world, all stored value. And a lot of things are used for that. Gold is worth $10 trillion in total. You've got all the fiat money in the world, fiat being government printed money, that's 60 trillion. You've got government bonds, you've got real estate. These are all used at people in Berlin, I'm sure, are aware that's if you bought in Berlin early on, you're probably feeling pretty good right now. The real estate there has gone crazy. All of these are stores of value. You're storing value in it. And so Bitcoin competes with these. Bitcoin right now is only worth $1 trillion total. So you can easily extrapolate future price potential if you look at gold, and then you extrapolate to real estate, which is in the hundreds of trillions. And so Bitcoin, I think, has a very long ways to go.
Yeah, I follow you for quite some time already on Twitter, and I have to recommend to everybody in the audience, do it the same. And you have to follow Dan. And your funny thing is, your second name is Held. It's very German, and in German it means hero. So you're my hero, actually, my Bitcoin hero, because I learn a lot about Bitcoin from you. And you have any German relatives or family?
Yeah, German, Swedish, Norwegian, but I'm 50% German. So,
okay, you speak any German by any chance?
Ein bisschen. Ich heiße Dan Held.
He's a hero.
I know a little bit. It's it's funny. Every time I go to Germany, I have a great time. All the Germans speak perfect English. Your English is spectacular, and every German I meet speaks perfect English. And so I'm very lucky when I go to Germany because everyone's so kind and speaks English really well. So I don't have to rely on my bad German.
So we switch to German if you don't mind now. No, just kidding.
Well, I think it's going to be a short interview if we do that.
Bitcoin is the same. Bitcoin.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I can handle that then.
So looking back 8 years from now, what surprised you the most in the last 8 years? So did it go all faster than you expected? The whole movement experience and everything?
I would say it went slower and faster than expected. So I was young when I first got into Bitcoin. I'm still young. I'm in my 30s, but I was in my 20s then. This is 8 years ago. And I thought we were going to change the whole financial system in a couple of years. I was young and idealistic, of course. Later, I realized things take a long time to change. Corporations take a long time to change. People's feelings about different topics take a long time to change, and that this was going to be a longer process. So in the beginning, it took longer than I expected, but then at the end, not at the end, but more closer to the present, it's gone faster than I've expected. So we hypothesized that institutions, the big institutional traders, these are investment banks, hedge funds, insurance companies, that they would come into Bitcoin and start to buy Bitcoin and recognize it as a gold 2.0. And we thought this might take a long time. And actually, we've seen them pile in over the last 6 months in an incredible way. Yeah. Tesla coming in was huge, $1.5 billion on their balance sheet. And then we had all these institutions, all the legacy big macro hedge fund legendary traders are all like, yes, this is gold 2.0. And this is from a very old age cohort. These are These are, 65 plus, which for them to understand Bitcoin and believe in it and invest in it, that's a big leap. That takes like a lot of fundamental change in how the world perceives Bitcoin. So that has happened faster than I have expected. But in the beginning, I thought we were going to go change the whole world in a couple of years. Things take a long time to play out.
Yeah, but we saw such rapid developments in the last couple of months, like the Coinbase IPO. Yeah, just fantastic. Then we saw MicroStrategy, we saw Tesla, we saw the first ETF in North America. So actually, I have this feeling it goes much faster than everybody expected when I talk to people who are really for the long term into Bitcoin for 5-10 years or something. So what do you expect for the future? Where will we be in 5 to 10 years? Will be Bitcoin the superior money? Will it be a currency for everybody, or will it still be the store of value?
Yeah, Bitcoin is largely achieving its goal. Its goal is to be a world reserve currency, a gold 2.0, and it's largely achieving that, which is incredible to see. People forget that when it was worth $10, that's what the whole world thought Bitcoin's probability was of becoming that new gold 2.0. It was a very low probability, and there were a lot of potential ways that Bitcoin could have hit like a permanent downturn or could have died. And so for Bitcoin to survive this long has been incredible. The future holds Bitcoin increasingly becoming a globally recognized store of value asset. That is happening now. So we're in that stage. Over a very long period of time, probably at least a decade or so, Bitcoin might transition to the medium of exchange and unit of account era. And in those eras, Bitcoin transitions to what we would commonly perceive as the euro, the dollar. Yeah. Medium of exchange means that's what we use at the grocery store. That's what we use to go buy a beer. With unit of account, that's what it's priced in. So you've got euros that are your pricing at the grocery store, mine are in dollars. And so Bitcoin has to first become globally held as a store of value, because then people, you can't spend it unless you own it. Yeah. So we have to go through that era first. And then after we hit a certain critical, kind of threshold of network effect, let's say 30% of a country's population owns Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin's price starts to stabilize. Again, this will take a very long time, like probably at least 10 years. Then Bitcoin will transition to those next two eras where it becomes like a full money, store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account.
When did you buy your first Bitcoin, by the way?
2012, and it was worth around $8 to $10. I forget exactly. There was kind of a range where it bounced between $8 and $12 for a little while.
Okay. Very early days. Okay, so did you have during this time, since 2012, ever the feeling that it was a bad investment, or did you doubt it, that it falls to zero?
Yeah, I don't think anyone can say that they were perfectly. I'm as bullish as they come. There's a meme in this space called HODL, and my last name being Held. Very, very applicable. It's my profession is what I do. I HODL. HODL. So look, we all doubt at some moments, like, will this succeed? Right. Certainly that always existed of like, will we survive this? And that the pit of your stomach, that despair, that worry, that I think every Bitcoiner's experienced that. If they say that they haven't, then they're lying. I've never been more bullish, though. I think in the beginning, there were a lot of pitfalls, like the Bitcoin Cash hard fork. Yeah. That was a really contentious civil war, if you will, between different stakeholders in the ecosystem. So that was a pretty intense moment. There were flippening attacks by Ethereum. So Bitcoin has, survived a lot. Also survived some other struggles as well. It didn't get stamped out by a certain government. The world didn't dip into multiple recessions while Bitcoin was trying to evolve. So Bitcoin has had a very favorable environment in its growth, but it has certainly survived a couple storms.
Yeah, sure. We saw a couple of bull markets, bear markets. We saw a small recession in March last year because of the Corona crisis. So before I go to the next topic, because right now we look actually back and we look at the early days of Bitcoin, but what do you think? Who is Satoshi?
This is everyone's favorite question. And yes, I would encourage everyone listening to this to go down your own rabbit hole. So rabbit hole in American terminology, to go down the discovery path of figuring out who Satoshi is. And through that, there's a lot of different avenues. I've spent 8 years thinking about who Satoshi is, and I'm not sure if I'm any closer than I was in the beginning of my search. But there's certainly some crowd favorites. One is Hal Finney. Hal Finney ghost wrote PGP cryptography. So he understood in PGP cryptography in the 1990s, that was considered to be a weapon by the United States government. So he knew the risks involved when it came to developing a new cryptocurrency and being pseudonymous or anonymous. He understood the importance of that because with PGP, he did that. And this was a tool that governments thought was a weapon. Yeah. Bitcoin very much is a weapon in that regard from a monetary perspective. So Hal Finney's a great selection. He was also on the cryptographer mailing list. He was the first person to receive a Bitcoin transaction, or maybe he received it from himself.
Clever guy.
Hey, yeah, exactly. So he's the first one to receive a Bitcoin transaction. He worked on some early Bitcoin core code. Hal Finney's a great popular favorite. His demeanor also fits well with Satoshi, and Hal Finney unfortunately passed away. He had a disease that he succumbed to. And so that actually lines up when Satoshi left Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So he's a crowd favorite. There's also Nick Szabo. Or Szabo, depends on, I forget what
how you pronounce it.
Yeah, correct pronunciation is. He wrote BitGold. BitGold was an early precursor to Bitcoin that Satoshi said Bitcoin was inspired by. He also wrote and very much intimately understood the origins of money. He very intimately understood what it took to create a good new money. I think a lot of folks in the Bitcoin blockchain space focus too much on the technology, but it's not about that. It's actually more about what makes a good money and what makes humans who are, we're biological, we're not computers, what makes us believe in a money versus like the code itself. The code is somewhat irrelevant. It's the trust that humans develop with the code that makes it valuable over time. You can't just spin up new code and trust develops with humans. Humans develop trust over time. And Bitcoin and how that all flows together is very different than many other cryptocurrency projects, where the amount of trust placed in Bitcoin and the amount of continuity of Bitcoin's monetary policy and proof of work function. Nick Szabo understood some of these things. And so it would be poetic if he was Satoshi.
And other people say it will be it has been a group of people, like different people. What's your take on this?
Yeah, there's kind of a fun interpretation here too, or not interpretation, but a kind of a fun pathway here where we could. So some people think that there was a group of people due to how complex it was. There was a lot of different aspects to Bitcoin. There was monetary policy and economics theory, origins of money theory. So historical, physics, proof of work is more about physics than code. And all these things together, it would be pretty wild if one person came up with that. It's possible, but would certainly be an incredible feat. Now, people will go, well, it might be folks in the space say it might be a group of people. Now, I have a fun interpretation of this where it could be like the NSA, where the NSA, you could imagine some cryptographers at the NSA were assigned with a project, build a weapon, an economic weapon to destabilize countries. The United States does this often. I'm not exactly proud of that. I wish we didn't operate like that, but that's what the United States does. And building an economic weapon is certainly very plausible. They also have the best cryptographers in the world. And the NSA had actually written about this a few decades prior. So that's also a fun one where like maybe a few NSA cryptographers were assigned to this task. They realized maybe this wasn't the right thing to do, and they released it into the wild or something, like let it out of the lab, if you will. So that's a fun one. I think, someone asked me, Dan, with more time that goes by, will we be closer or farther away to finding Satoshi? It's a really good question. I'm not sure. I think the farther we get away from when Satoshi was around, the less likely it'll be that we find him.
Hmm. Actually, it doesn't matter who it is. We just should be very, very grateful about this present he gave us for perhaps sound money. And it's like, it's a present. It's a gift. It's definitely a gift. Whoever it is. So he deserves the Nobel Prize, actually. So, but
totally.
definitely. But let's talk about your topic, one of your topics is the super cycle. And usually Bitcoin goes through these boom and bust cycles every 4 years after the halving. So, and you have been very vocal actually about a different cycle right now. This time you say there will be a super cycle, perhaps not a 4-year cycle. So perhaps you can introduce the super cycle to the audience, please.
Yeah, so Bitcoin moves in very volatile patterns. You have these big bull runs, and then you have a bear market. Now, Bitcoin has done this multiple times, and it's typically done around the halving. The halving is a supply schedule for Bitcoin. It's how Bitcoins are produced over time, up to 21 million. People hypothesize that that is the method in which the cycles begin. Now, I don't want to spend too much time thinking about that. Just wanted to add that as a note. We've got these 4-year cycles that occur around the halving, and these halvings, these cycles have occurred all during a macro or mainstream world bull run. We haven't had a recession since 2008. We've had like little mini ones, but nothing like major, no depression, no recession. And Bitcoin was about to begin, in 2020 was the next halving. So May 2020 was the next Bitcoin halving. And then 2021 was predicted to be the bull run based on historical cycles. So Bitcoin has never had a bull run while people started to distrust their government. That's the whole reason why Bitcoin was created, is that you don't have to trust your government. You can just trust Bitcoin instead. And you can trust the code, and you can trust that no one has control over it, which is really cool and a very different paradigm. But people don't know they need that until there's moments when they don't trust their government. And with COVID, that definitely brought it back into focus, where people started to question, well, what was my government's response to COVID? Was that the right approach? What was my government's response in terms of money printing? So printing off money and creating stimulus packages, was that appropriate? So with that, that really brings Bitcoin's value into focus. Now it makes sense. And that crystallized with the inclusion of a new group called the institutions. The institutions, as I mentioned before, investment banks, hedge funds, they came and bought into the new narrative of Bitcoin being gold 2.0. This new kind of wave of enthusiasm was all centered around Bitcoin Gold 2.0. This is unlike any other Bitcoin bull run before. No Bitcoin bull run before had the institutions, didn't have a recession, and we also had clarity of narrative and easy to understand. There weren't podcasts or great YouTube channels like Mark has here. Like back in 5-6 years ago, those didn't exist, and now we've got such great content where people can listen to this interview, understand Bitcoin more intimately, because there are great courses to go take Bitcoin on, or to understand Bitcoin with, or other podcasts. And so the content increases the amount of folks who understand and get Bitcoin, who then buy into Bitcoin, which makes the cycle bigger. So all of this put together is what I hypothesize might be a Bitcoin super cycle. Bitcoin super cycle would be if it breaks the pattern of previous cycles, and that means that it either has a more bullish cycle or it has a less intense bearish cycle. So I don't think it's highly probable. I think it's possible. And I think that's where a lot of people, when I wrote this when Bitcoin is worth $8,500 back almost a year and a half ago. People were like, that's crazy talk. There's no way it's going to do that. And now people are like, oh, that's somewhat plausible. I think it's possible. I don't think it's super probable. But essentially, this time is very different for Bitcoin. And it would be strange to find that it would behave normally like all the other cycles before it.
So what's your price target actually during this cycle? Where will we see the peak, and when will the super cycle end?
Yeah, that's a great question. So now this is getting into, as we call it, moon math.
No. It's like...
yeah. Draw some patterns on charts. If we look at historical price movement of the other Bitcoin bull runs, it projects that Bitcoin will be between $100,000 and $300,000 a Bitcoin. This is that's the banded range of probabilistic outcomes based on historical data. As we all know, history doesn't predict the future, but if we look at it that way, that's a good way of looking at what the average outcome might be. So the outcome I'm describing is like over $500,000 of Bitcoin, maybe up to $1 million. And then on the downside, Bitcoin typically in the bear market drops 80% from the all-time high down to the bottom of the bear. I think we have a less severe bear market, so something much less, maybe like 30 or 40% is what the low is, or 50% versus 80%.
So do you expect that the super cycle or the bull market will end this year or next year?
Historically, if we look at historical patterns, we should reach the peak of the bull market this year.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a super cycle, there could be all sorts of weird things that go on where, a super cycle could also be Bitcoin has like a normal cycle and then goes flat. Like, again, it doesn't have a very intense bear market. So we could see like a more sustained bull run too. Maybe there's like we think that we've reached the peak later this fall, and then it dips and then it goes back again in early spring 2022. People forget that in 2013, Bitcoin had 2 bull runs in 1 year.
Yes. Yeah.
Or went from $10 to 120 down to, or $10 to 260 down to 80 and 80 to 1200. So we could have something like that again, which would be, and that would be like a super cycle-esque moment. But I think, based on all historical information, we should see the peak of Bitcoin's bull run this year. But again, it's a guess.
Yeah. So, but that's why you all have to follow Dan on Twitter, definitely. I will post all the Twitter handles in the show notes, and I will retweet it as well as soon as you give us a signal when to sell, when to buy. It's so important, the timing. But do you expect actually during this cycle, during this bull run, that a nation state will come out in favor of Bitcoin and say, hey, we bought some Bitcoin just in case it will catch up?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that would be a strong sign for the super cycle, would be having a government come in and buy Bitcoin, put it on their, hold it as like part of one of the reserve assets. I think that it won't be the ECB, it won't be the United States, but it might be like a China, Russia, or some smaller country. I do think that, what's interesting about this idea is that there's a game theory component to where you have to play the game.
Yeah.
So let's say the rumor comes out that the ECB has bought Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if it's true or not, because if the US government believes that, or the Fed believes that, and then other central banks believe that, then they might buy in anticipation that could be true. So you go down this mental cycle of, as long as the rumor is plausible enough, it will catch on, and that will force everyone to potentially think about, oh, am I going to be the last bank to buy it? Am I going to be the last central bank to buy it? So yeah, I think that's possible. I think it's pretty low likelihood, but would be a strong signal of a super cycle if a central bank bought it this bull run. But certainly, I don't think it probably won't be the Fed or ECB or any.
Definitely not. They hate it.
Yeah, they hate it. Well, Jerome Powell's been pretty open-minded with Bitcoin. He actually understands. He called it a speculative store of value. So he understands the basic principles, that it's a gold 2.0. So at least they understand it. And I think that's the first step.
Yeah. That would actually suit to Peter Thiel's statement he made recently when he said it's a geopolitical weapon actually, and the United States should take a look at it, and before China buys it and holds it, because it's a war between China and the United States. So what do you think about his statement? Was he right? Because many people just made something up like, oh, he says Bitcoin is bad and you should ban it or something. They didn't understand it actually, what he really meant.
Yeah, I think that was misinterpreted what he meant.
Definitely.
He meant that like Bitcoin is a geopolitical tool, and I think he said he hopes the United States buys it, or hopes the United States takes it seriously before other countries do. Because if we don't, and they get a significant advantage over us, look, I think the United States has a lot of problems, and I think that we need to fix those. But I certainly think we are in a better position than, say, Russia or China in terms of human rights and other things. So again, the US isn't great, but it's better than those other two options. So I do think that it's critical Europe and the United States kind of maintain some of that status and that control. And so I think them buying into Bitcoin would be my ideal situation. At the same time, I can't control what happens in Bitcoin. Luckily, even if China or Russia buys Bitcoin, they can't control Bitcoin if they do. Yeah. So that's what makes Bitcoin so really interesting from a game theory perspective.
Definitely. Actually, I wrote in my new book that the central bank who buys Bitcoin first will be the winner, because we know all the central banks have gold as a reserve currency in their deposits and the balance sheet. But no one has Bitcoin so far, but if they would buy Bitcoin, it would be a first move advantage, and yeah, they would be the winner actually in this game. So he said actually the same what I wrote a couple of weeks ago. So this will be really interesting, because I think, for example, if the German Bundesbank would buy Bitcoin, we have over 3,000 tons of gold. Why don't put like 1 billion in Bitcoin? It's better than buying bonds from Italy, they're screwed anyhow. So
yeah, there was actually a member of the Bundesbank said something to me and a group of Bitcoiners at a Munich Bitcoin conference a few years ago. And he whispered to us, he goes, "My religion is bigger than yours." And he was right. It's the euro, the dollar, Bitcoin is all based on aggregate belief in it, trust or belief in it. And so he's right, but also he's wrong about who might win. I think Bitcoin has a very good chance of becoming a much larger group that people of believers.
Yeah.
And that's where in the opportunity lies. Will you believe in Bitcoin before others do? For those who have in the past, like myself, we've been rewarded for that. And so that's where I think, I would, it would be really interesting to see like Bundesbank potentially
buying Bitcoin.
But that was I really like that statement, because it demonstrated to me that he intimately understood exactly what Bitcoin was all about and what all money was all about.
Yeah. I think the magic wall is if we get to 6 figures, if we hit $100,000, I think the media will go crazy and we will still see FOMO like never before. So what do you expect, or when will be the super cycle happen, or which price target has the Bitcoin price reached that you would say confidently, oh, okay, now this is the super cycle? It's not only the 4-year cycle, it's the super cycle. Is it like more than 300, more than 500, a million?
I would say like more than 500,000. I would say, but between 500,000 and a million would be like that target range for a super cycle-esque era. That break all the previous models of what expectations are.
So the most important question during this interview actually is coming now, Dan. So when would you sell?
I'm Dan Held. I don't sell.
Hedl.
I held.
Even you hold, hodl. Even if we would see a totally, I don't know, overpriced asset bull run like over 1 or 2 million, and you would definitely know there will be a correction of 50% or 50%.
Yeah, let me put it in perspective. So with people ask me this all the time, Dan, when should I sell my Bitcoin? What, like, do I hodl for forever? You only live one life. Live it to your fullest. If your partner wants to buy a home and you not wanting to sell your Bitcoin to buy the home will end up in a divorce or something, I don't recommend that. You have one life to live. Bitcoin's not going to make you happy around a spectrum of different, Bitcoin will solve some money problems for you, but might not solve family problems. Do you think, if you have like a ton of debt, and Bitcoin would make you sleep better at night if you sold it and paid off your debt? Now, there's the portfolio optimization perspective. That's the one I come from because I'm in a more fortunate financial circumstance. But a lot of people aren't. I understand people want to buy a home for the first time. They want to pay off their debt. But for me, I'm in a very fortunate financial circumstance where I don't have like kids and I don't have a lot of liability, and I can take very, very big risks. So from a portfolio management perspective, it's hard to want to take money or sell Bitcoin when it hasn't hit a 10, 20, 50 trillion market cap, because that to me represents like the fulfillment of my original investment thesis that Bitcoin is a gold 2.0 store of value asset. And so at that level, sure, then Bitcoin becomes boring. Bitcoin's ultimate purpose, like after all this price appreciation, because it wasn't going to go from zero to a global sound money in a linear fashion. It was going to do that in these cycles. When Bitcoin succeeds, it'll be like grandpa's gold. You'll be like, okay, grandpa, cool. You've got gold. It's really boring. And it only goes up 1% a year. That's where I don't think Bitcoin's not going to be this speculative asset for forever. In that era, a lot of people would, Bitcoin is used as that very safe haven asset, but you probably want to go invest in other things. So Bitcoin has been a phenomenal return thus far, and I think will be for the next decade. But after that point, it should slow down and be kind of boring. In the meantime, what I do is I lend out my Bitcoin and earn a yield on that. That is not like a savings account. It includes much more risk than a savings account. Or I can borrow against it, which I've also done. So I've borrowed against my Bitcoin using my Bitcoin as collateral $4 and then I use those dollars. I actually use those dollars to buy more Bitcoin.
Smart. Yeah, very nice.
Stressful, but smart. So yeah, there's no right or wrong way to do it. If you hold Bitcoin, I'm not going to tell you that you have to hold it for forever. I personally want to hold it as long as I possibly can, because I think we have a lot more price appreciation, but you only have one life to live. So
yeah, sure.
Go live it, go enjoy it. I don't think it's something that should be worth, your mental health for, I've been in for 8 years. That's a long time. I've seen my net worth go up, 10x, 20x, and then drop 80% 3 times.
Yeah, it's hard.
I'm 33. That's a lot to go through. That's a lot of volatility. I mean, almost very few people my age have ever gone through that much volatility. And each time there's a zero added to the net worth, right? So each cycle becomes more and more, you're like, oh, it dropped 80%. I only lost this much. And now it's like, well, now add a zero to that. I lost that much. And then you go down and you're like, okay, this is like a lot of money. So yeah, I mean, I also think about money in terms of like years. So take like your post-tax salary.
Yeah.
After you've paid taxes, when your net worth rises to a certain level and that post-tax, yearly value of like, let's say your post-tax income is 50,000 euro. And you have a ton of Bitcoin and you look at it and you're like, wow, if I sold 10%, I could technically live for 10 years and not have to work. These are the sort of thing. I'm not saying that that's the right time to sell or not, but that's how I like to think about money, is that money is also time.
Yeah.
In a way. So depending on what stage you are in life, if you're close to retirement, maybe that pushes you into an early retirement. If you're young, maybe you can go work on some cool projects. I don't think there's a wrong or right way to do it, but yeah, I certainly will try to hodl as long as I can. It's been a pretty stressful journey. I also am fortunate because I work at Kraken. Kraken's a big U.S. exchange, a U.S. and European exchange, really big in Europe. And
yeah, we have an affiliate link. So if anybody's interested, look at the show notes. We work together with Kraken. It's actually the only exchange we recommend outside Europe and placed. I have to cut it. Placed. They are placed outside.
Yeah, located.
Located. Thank you very much for educating me. Located in the United States, but it's a really, really, really good exchange. So definitely check it out. And Dan is working there. So hey, what do you need more to know? So it's really good.
Totally. I was going to say, it's easy for me not to sell my Bitcoin because I have Kraken equity and I have a good salary and everything else. So that makes it easier, but I understand that not everyone's in my circumstance.
Yeah. Let's do some rapid fire questions. Today I had an interview about my new book, and there was a German guy, German journalist from a really big newspaper. And he came, of course, with the one and only question they always say to talk about Bitcoin. It's like, oh, it's using so much energy consumption. It's so bad for the environment. And I told him, of course, everything this is wrong and this is prejudges and everything. So what's your short version if somebody asks you about the energy consumption of Bitcoin? And we might do another interview about this in the future, but just give us your insights.
Yeah, it's definitely a longer conversation, but I'll try to summarize it here. When someone is worried about Bitcoin's energy consumption, they're 99.9% of the time dishonest. And here's why. Did they also look at the energy consumption of the euro, the dollar, and all the facilities required to keep that up and running? The bank servers, the people, all the energy they consume. Visa, MasterCard. I mean, Bitcoin replaces a financial system. It's not just replacing Visa or something. And so that's where if these people who are critical about Bitcoin's energy consumption have not first started with the massive energy consumption of governments and how they prop up their money, then it's not a true conversation around environmentalism. It's a conversation about how they hate Bitcoin. And that's ultimately what these energy arguments are about. They hate Bitcoin and they hate its energy usage, no matter how little or how much energy it used. But they're not intellectually honest enough to go examine other financial systems, because that's how you would do it, is you go, okay, Bitcoin is using a lot of energy, but how about the existing financial system? One more point on this. Since when did it become popular to criticize personal energy consumption? If I want to watch the Kardashians on TV, I don't give a shiza. Like, I don't give a shit, man. I'm going to go watch it. I don't care if you think it's wasteful or not. Like, fuck you. I'm going to go do it. If you want a burger and someone wants a sausage, who gives a shit? Like, yeah, one used more energy, but who cares? Like, we're not going to get down to the granular level of having to justify my energy consumption to everyone. Like, that's absurd. There's no electricity police, like.
Not yet. Wait, we'll get to socialism soon, everywhere.
True. Yeah, true. That could happen. But until then, I think in a free society, we paid for the electricity and we're allowed to do whatever the hell we want with it. This whole universe is created of energy. It's per the laws of thermodynamics. Everything in the universe is made of energy. So us breathing and talking right now uses energy. The building that was built around us used energy. Energy consumption is not a bad thing. Energy consumption is inherent to the human condition. And in fact, it's inherent to quality of life. You can certainly use a lot less energy if you lived in the middle of the wilderness with no heating or cooling mechanism, and you used very little, you had to hand wash clothes. We built these machines around us to enhance the quality of life. Dishwashers, washer dryers, cooking machines, airplanes, cars.
Smartphones.
I don't want to walk from here to Germany. I can't do that. I'd have to go swim. I fly on a plane, and the plane uses fuel, and that uses energy, and that creates emissions. I want to fly around the world. I'm not going to feel bad about that. No, certainly we can, of course, try to make the mixture of what energy, where it comes from, more clean. I think that's the core root of the argument, is people are worried about the energy mix. And Bitcoin, that's not Bitcoin's fault, though, of energy mix. Bitcoin's using whatever energy is available.
Yeah.
Most people are like, oh, well, it uses this much clean energy or not. That's not Bitcoin's fault. Bitcoin's not at fault here for choosing choosing dirty or clean energy. That's a government and company level fault of we should be doing more nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is a phenomenal resource that people have just found politically distasteful, but it works well. Yeah. It's an incredible energy.
Yeah,
it's
emission.
Great. And it's great for the environment. Yeah. That's the real conversation, is let's go back to how energy is being created. And we need to focus on green sources of that, including a huge scaling up of nuclear. But that's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah, we will do another interview. Don't worry. People will definitely ask for it. So another question I have, of course, because alt season is upon us. Yeah. Do you have any shit coins?
I don't. But Dogecoin certainly seems to be rallying. I think today it's up 40. Dogecoin is wild.
Bitcoin.
I know Jackson Palmer, the guy who created it. He lives
no
in San
way.
Francisco.
Cool.
Yeah, I've hung out with him, grabbed dinner, drinks with him at least a dozen times, and he created it as a joke.
I know.
He doesn't like crypto at all. That's what's so wild about this, is he doesn't like it at all. He made it as a joke, but it's the joke that's going to haunt him for forever. He owns no Dogecoin.
Oh God.
I know, right? And if he did, he'd be like a billionaire. It'd be crazy. So yeah, it's really funny. The San Francisco startup scene. Ripple, Stellar, Dogecoin, those are all created out here, partially Ethereum. So it's been kind of crazy to see them come and go. But Dogecoin, that's just wild to see the price appreciation.
Crazy. It's all because of Elon, man. He made it. He's a pumper, a scammer.
He's taking it to the moon.
And even further, looks like to Mars. Yeah. So do you think Bitcoin will become a global currency?
Yes. The short answer is yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is rapid fire, so maybe that's an appropriate.
Yeah, that's a perfect question, actually. Yeah. Okay, then another question I have for you. So 10 years in the future, Bitcoin failed and vanished. So what was the most likely reason?
People stop believing in it. That's the most likely reason. The faith is what binds the community together. It's what supplies a floor to the price. If the community was split, like the Bitcoin Cash hard fork, but split in a more 50-50 manner, that would be, I think, very deadly for Bitcoin.
Okay. And another question, the last question actually on my rapid fire side is, will Kraken do an IPO as well?
Yeah, Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, has publicly stated that we are going to do an IPO or direct listing next year.
Okay.
So I'm pretty excited about that. I think that after Coinbase's IPO, we're all naturally excited about Kraken going public. We're doing, it's a ton of work to do, and I can't comment on it too further, but Jesse has set 2022 as kind of the target range for
When
that.
Did he pronounce it? I didn't hear it?
It's on Bloomberg. I think
Today
about
or
a
what?
month or two ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I missed that, so I have to cut this out. Look, I like an idiot. Shit. No, just kidding. So where can people learn more about you? How can they follow you?
Yeah. So if you're on Twitter, now I know Twitter's not a super popular social channel. For some reason, crypto, people like to talk about Bitcoin and crypto on Twitter. I'm Dan Held is my Twitter handle. And then on YouTube, I actually have a YouTube channel as well. I talk about different Bitcoin topics in depth weekly, and that's Dan Held on YouTube.
I definitely recommend your newsletter and of course your YouTube channel. Talk about your newsletter. Just give us an insight. What's the newsletter about?
Yeah, so I write my newsletter on Thursdays. It's called The Held Report, and it's on Substack. Substack is a publishing tool. And if you subscribe to that, that's my paid subscription. And on Thursdays, you get access to my thoughts weekly first.
How much is it?
Later, it's $15 a month. So it's not
cheap.
that much.
It's fucking cheap. Yeah, it's scheiße cheap. And cheap actually because the content is it's brilliant. And do you accept Bitcoin?
I do accept Bitcoin. If you email me directly, I will make that happen.
Perfect.
I've heard Substack is going to add Bitcoin payment methods soon. So then it would be all built in, which would be awesome. So if you go there, check it out. You can sign up for the free newsletter, which comes out once a month, or if you want the paid one, it comes out once a week. I cover different Bitcoin topics like the super cycle in depth. So if you want to hear more about this, you can read that. If you want to hear about proof of work versus proof of stake or Bitcoin versus Ethereum, I dive into those as well. Basically, any topic on Bitcoin I cover there. What's cool is when you subscribe, you get access to all the archives. And as a paid subscriber, you get to vote on the next topic, which ensures that I'm writing what people want to hear about, which I think is really cool. So I've got a great relationship with my audience there. And I have a Q&A. So if you're a paid subscriber, you get all of those where you're able to ask me questions and I will answer every single question. So that's what I have. Social media, YouTube and Twitter. If you want to go more in depth, hear more about Bitcoin from my perspective, my newsletter, The Held Report, is a great place to go.
I will put all the links, of course, in the subscription. And don't be cheap, guys. $15 a month, it's nothing. You get a perfect return on investment, and you invest in the best asset actually you can have. It's your intelligence and it's your knowledge about everything. So I definitely recommend it. And guys, I never recommend something, so it's the first time. So this time I do, because I think it's totally worth it. So anyhow, I have one last question which came up in my mind when you mentioned Ethereum, because everybody is so, we see a new all-time high. I made just last week a video on my YouTube channel about Ethereum, why it's a scam, and people hated it. Of course, the Ethereum army just came, no, Ethereum is great, and I said, hey, it's not decentralized. It's a company actually located in Switzerland, and Vitalik is the main figure and everything. So and I saw 2017, I saw the FOMO and the boom, and then I saw the bust, of course. And I don't like, I have shit coins, I have to admit. Yeah, I have shit coins because I play the cycles. It's all season, I buy shit coins and later I switch to Bitcoin. It's the game to have more Bitcoin in the end. But you have to read the cycles, and I think it's really dangerous that people go into the altcoins and I don't know, buy and get loans from the bank and buy more Cardano, IOTA, and Ripple and all this shit. And in the end, it's a scam. It's my interpretation, And so I made this video, and some people hated it, other people loved it. All the Bitcoin maximalists. I'm always open-minded, I wouldn't say that I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, but Ethereum, Bitcoin. So what's your take on this? Is Ethereum the world computer or reserve currency? I don't know, store of value. Yeah. What's their game? What do they want?
Look, I'm a Bitcoin realist.
Okay.
I fly drones for fun. I'm going to be cryopreserved when I die. I'm into a lot of weird techie things. I don't think I'm conservative at all as early Bitcoin. And what's really interesting about how narratives come and go in crypto, I've seen 10,000 cryptocurrencies come and go in 10 years or 8 years that I've been in. That's a lot. There was alt season 2013, 2017, and now. The reason why your friends are talking to you about the certain alt is because the price went up.
Yeah.
That's why. It's not because of it, it all of a sudden solved something that was novel or something like that. Narratives Bitcoin has this too, but the price of Bitcoin goes up and the narratives come around why the price went up and why it should go up. And Dogecoin and Ethereum have the same narrative path of like price goes up, then people get excited about it, and then the narratives spin up as to why it went up. But if you noticed, no one on the Ethereum side was saying like no one expected it to do this. Certainly they were like, oh, Ethereum's going to go up, but like no one predicted, oh, this week it's going to start going up. I think with all of these, like Bitcoin, blockchain tech was built to build Bitcoin. That's what it was purpose built for. Bitcoin, yes, you might be able to trade the alts. And if you think you're good at that, you should go try that. But ultimately, if you're trying to beat Bitcoin's return on a risk adjusted perspective, because like, will you pick the right alt that pumps? Maybe. And so that's the tricky part. And so Bitcoin from a risk adjusted perspective of like, yeah, Bitcoin is going to go 10x. You could find an alt that goes 100x, but the likelihood that you find the right alt that goes up 100x is much lower than Bitcoin going 10x. So that's where I think just buying and hodling Bitcoin is my personal thesis. You could certainly try that route. People much smarter than me do that. I just don't think I can time these markets very well. But that's what I think we're seeing in Ethereum, is that the price is going up. People are starting to spin up narratives as to why the price is going up, but nothing's really changed there too much.
Yeah. And that's why you are Dan Held, the German hero, so to say. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. It was great talking to you. I hope we can repeat this pretty soon. I think we have a lot to talk about in the future. So Dan, thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Mark. Tschüss.
Very good. Bye.